All right, so we're going to start. Welcome, everyone. My name is Flo. I'm the Corporate Innovation Manager for the US branch of Choose Paris region. So I will be your host today for our tech meeting dedicated to smart mobility. So welcome, everyone. So this session will be recorded. So please let me know if anyone would be against it. Great. So let me share the program for today. So this is our agenda for today. So after a short introduction of what we do, I'll provide some key figures about the overall mobility industry. Then we will move to the fireside chat with our experts. So today, Marc, Amblard, and Ethan Lipman to discuss the industry and tomorrow's big trends of innovation. And then, of course, we're going to finish this event with a selection of startups, and they will be presenting their solutions and products. So we will answer questions at the end of the fireside chat if you have any to our experts. So feel free to use the question feature of Livestorm to ask your question. All right, so let's jump into it with a short presentation of Choose Paris region and what we do. So for some of you who don't know us, Choose Paris region is a catalyst for business and innovation. We partner with Fortune 500 corporations in order to support international companies willing to expand their business and set up business in the Paris region. So thanks to our presence and vibrant tech ecosystem located in San Francisco, New York, Beijing, Shanghai, and of course Paris, we are in touch with over 4,000 international companies every year. So this unique relationship with large corporations on one hand and with innovative, fast-growing companies on the other hand led us to create the Global Open Innovation Network about 5 years ago. So through this global program, we organize about 20 events a year to foster business and technology partnerships between large corporations and startups. So, of course, since the pandemic moved our events online, it allowed us to connect and get in touch with more people, more companies. So I would say that has been a pretty interesting experience. So to tell you a little bit more, we cover an area of technologies. And so as you can see here, we cover AI, robotics, blockchain, retail, health, and you name it. So today we are going to talk about mobility. So first, I wanted to show you a brief overview of the mobility industry. Of course, it's composed of different actors from various industries, and they're all well known. Of course, it could be Tesla, Uber, Ford, Bolt, etc., because it's a lot of different components in this industry. Here are some key figures I wanted to share today. I wanted to stop on three main figures really quickly to set up the base of our discussion with the panel. So first, the global mobility market was valued around $130 billion in 2021, based on a PwC report. Of course, mobility, like I said, it's composed of different concepts that are not counted here. So actually, we have many different numbers based on what we're counting. The second one, something really important as well, is that by 2027, from the same report, the market is expected to reach $227 billion. So it's a really important, fast-growing industry. And last, of course, the compound annual growth rate for this industry is expected to be around 20% from 2021 to 2027. So really important as well. So those trends and industries where mobility are a prominent trend today, as we can see here, are of course electricity with cars, bikes, for example. It's mobility as a service. It's autonomous cars and air mobility. So we're going to discuss that, of course, with our panel today. So to finish this brief overview of the mobility industry, I wanted to share this non-exhaustive market map with you. We designed it based on different players we have identified on the market. It's missing a few actors, of course, but it gives us a good understanding on what's happening these days. So I don't want to get into too much details. So if you're interested or have a question, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be glad to share it with you or tell you how I built it. Great. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our two experts today for the fireside chat. So Marc, Ethan, if you can join me on stage. So Marc is a mobility expert. He's been in the Bay Area around San Francisco for 6 years. He has a tremendous expertise in mobility. So I'm tagging him. Ethan, of course, as well, mobility expert. Hello, Ethan. How you doing? Hello, Marc.
Hello, Florian. How are you?
Ethan, I think you're on mute for now.
Not anymore.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to open up the full screen here. Thank you again for joining me. I'm very excited to have you and have a discussion today. So maybe first of all, and to give some context to the audience, maybe you could both present yourself, tell us a little bit about you, the organization you're representing, maybe your current projects, initiatives, something like that, really short, 2-3 minutes. Who wants to start? Marc, you want to start?
Sure, yes. Good to see you again, Ethan. Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Sorry for my green background. Somehow my normal background did not pop up. But so I manage Orsay Consulting, or RACY Consulting, based in Silicon Valley. My background is mobility. I worked about 20 years in automotive companies, 2 OEMs, a tier 1 supplier. I also work in the rail sector. I had strategy for Alstom Transport for several years, so for global business. I've been in Silicon Valley for about 6 years now, almost 6 years in early 2023. So Orsay Consulting is my advisory business. It's dedicated to autonomous to mobility and auto tech, and that means electrification, autonomous driving, new mobility modes, software-defined vehicle. So everything that has to do with new technologies, innovation related to mobility, whether it be technology, business models. My clients are OEMs, tier 1 suppliers, engineering companies, and mobility providers, mostly in Europe. But I'm also working with startups, both in Silicon Valley and in Europe. On the startup side, I work on product market fit, good market strategy, business development strategy, help also startups with introducing them to the industry. And on the corporate side, I do a lot of scouting of a database with over 3,500 companies across the globe, probably 95% startups. I do a lot of sort of scouting, deep dives on technology and businesses, workshop with executive teams, public speaking, and I invite you also to check out the newsletter that I've been publishing since 2016 with monthly articles. You'll find them on orsayconsulting.net. Just last one I published earlier this week was a consultation in the autonomous driving space. Obviously, this is a free newsletter. So this is, in a nutshell, what I've been doing, and I'm passionate about that. So
amazing, thank you, Ethan. Yeah.
It's a tough act to follow, but I'm happy to be here with you, Marc. I was lucky to start my career in the solar power industry. So I come to transportation from the energy and infrastructure side of things. 2006, I joined some of the earliest in the United States in the solar power industry, doing grid tied photovoltaic installation, design, permitting, did everything related to solar power. Around 2017, I joined the electric mobility transition in earnest. I've worked for some of the major CPOs, charge point operators, and in 2020, I had an amazing opportunity to help build a nonprofit that transitioned my focus over to food sustainability. Spent a little bit of time doing some work in the vertical farming space, but I had already popped up my own consulting firm, which I'm a little bit newer at than Marc's history. But I'm coming in to help on the charging infrastructure side. So I've developed some expertise in solar, battery, and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And from my perspective, solar and electric vehicles are like peanut butter and jelly. These things go together. If you're an electric vehicle purchaser, if you're going to purchase one, you probably want solar panels. And if you're purchasing solar panels, you're probably going to get an electric vehicle. This is happening everywhere from residential to commercial, going on auto dealers, going on commercial real estate. There's a lot of challenges throughout the marketplace as we try to bring these solutions to fruition, but we're doing it. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Thank you, Ethan. Definitely starting the conversation for sure. Great. So first question, really general question, and about what happened the past 2 years. Of course, wanted to start here. In a society that we're constantly moving. We built new ways of transportation since like the beginning of time, pretty much. And suddenly the entire planet was on lockdown, and had to stay still, limit their movement. So I wanted to ask you what happened to everything we've built, what happened to the mobility industry those past 2 years, and are we back to normal? How the industry was pretty much impacted by COVID-19. So yeah, Ethan, maybe.
I love that question. It's actually near and dear to my heart because pandemic changed my career. I left my company and started something different. I think a lot of people shifted what they were doing in one way or another. One thing I noticed during pandemic is we had the best air quality in Los Angeles, for instance, that was on human record. And I think that was repeated in many cities across the globe. And that's something that we should remember and we should take with us. The point source emissions coming from vehicles went down because we stopped driving mostly. And part of that was personal transportation. And part of that was something a little bit different, like the trucking and the supply chain that bring those products to the market. So there's that learning, and then there's the transition. What happened to mobility? Well, I certainly saw no cars on the road. And in a certain extent, this was eerie. There was also something that happened outside of the car space. There was a big hit to public transportation. There's a lot of people, and I don't think we go back to normal so quickly on this. There's a lot of people who are very hesitant to get on Bay Area rapid transit, for instance, for many reasons, from the way it's operated to how clean it is to how it was during pandemic and people having their own fear. Not everybody, if I go to a conference today, I wear a mask. So that's not to say that everybody needs to wear a mask, but some people have concerns around if you're going to go to public infrastructure to some of the best high-speed rail, whether it's in France or whether it's BART in California. Some people have their own sensibilities and concerns around this, and I think that's driven more people to be on bikes, electric scooters, and personal electric cars because you're simply not with other people. Now, I hope that goes away and we all can be in public infrastructure together again. But electrification is certainly increasing partially as a result of this.
Yeah, definitely. Marc, yeah?
Yeah, no, fully agree. Thank you, Florian. I agree with you, Florian. Ethan, allow me to add a couple of things, just a complementary approach to what you said. Since also there was a lot of major reduction in people's movements, we've seen some cities deciding to definitely close streets, and we've seen that in Paris. We've seen that in Palo Alto here, for instance, where I reside. We had a city with cafes now are actually occupying, streets where cafes occupying the land, and we've seen that I think across many countries, and that's for the better, with fewer, more local for local, and obviously an impact on emissions. Second thing I would mention is, and obviously one of the first point is things like micromobility that has increased in terms of electric bikes, as Florian, as Ethan explained. The second point I would mention was autonomous driving, which have seen an up and most recently a downtrend in terms of hype perspective as to when this is likely to come to fruition. We can come back to that later on. I'm not sure this is necessarily related to COVID, but this is certainly one thing that has occurred over the past 2 years. Third thing I would mention is, to broaden the spectrum beyond what Ethan mentioned about electrification, we've seen a definite acceleration in terms of market share. I'm sure we'll come back to that in terms of product offering, in terms of regulatory frameworks, certainly in Europe and in the US, that will put electrification on an accelerated path towards omnipresence, basically. So just to get us started, I'm sure there are many other things we could mention.
Yeah, definitely. Great. So jumping right into it, I think it's one of the most important things today is of course electrification. We've talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to start with this, of course, because it's stated as one of the easiest way or powerful way to decarbonize. And of course, we think about transportation and mobility as like the main example of this. So can you explain to us how it works in those areas, like how we going to transition from like oil, like pretty much industry or gas industry, and switch to pretty much like electrification if possible? Maybe Ethan, yeah.
I'm happy to take that. The transition is going to happen and is happening slower than some people like and faster than other people would like. In the way in which it's happening is, first of all, by a lot of people doing a lot of work. The background that I'd like to offer is the last transition we saw that was as big as this, in my view, is switching from the horse and buggy to the internal combustion engine car. And by the way, the electric car was there back then as well. The history speaks for itself. The transition happens through lots of people doing construction work, and it happens through lots of people doing design work, and lots of marketing, and lots of people changing hearts and minds. There was a history of the electric car that resulted in a movie called Who Killed the Electric Car? This was both a confluence of business decisions and policy decisions and personal individual consumer decisions. And the backlash that happened back then, these were difficult times and people expressed themselves. The transition that happens as we scale from 0% to 1% to, when you scale something, it's very different than doing a 1 to 2% kind of thing. As an example, as a analogy, Apple Computer was a very different company when they were a small company. Now they're a very big company and they have to deal with a lot of customers. So to be very specific, I've been lucky to be involved in the construction, the design, the installation of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure in public. So I know a lot about that. I know much less about what it's like to work directly with a OEM that's manufacturing one of these cars. But I've been inside their operations and I've seen them. I know what it is. I bet Marc can speak much more to that issue.
Yeah, allow me to also to bring a different angle to that. Again, complementary to what Eastman raised. One thing, just a couple of numbers. In my view, the modern EV era started in 2011, 2012, when we saw three vehicles come in the market, namely Tesla Model S, Nissan Leaf, and Renault Zoe. One in each region, I guess I should say, Asia, Europe, and the US. Obviously, in the US, Renault Zoe is not known, but this was definitely a market leader. And there's been obviously a couple other vehicles around this technology. Renault had a couple other vehicles alongside that. And it took until probably 2016, 2018 until the industry realized this was real. There was potential beyond that when Tesla started to take market share, of the German industry. But obviously, between the time you realize that this is a thing and the time you bring vehicles to market, it takes a few years. And we started seeing that wave probably 2020, and we see obviously now an increase and an acceleration that wave in terms of more segments covered, namely pickup trucks in the US recently, but also different vehicle body shapes. In terms of market share, that is. And now the US stands at about 5% penetration for the first 9 months of 2022 of battery EVs. Europe stands at about 15 or 16%. And China is in the same range, possibly a bit higher. So we are now on the steep acceleration. Probably the battery EV market size is probably increasing at a rate of about 50%, which is obviously we're on the vertical part of the S curve. This is being also accelerated by public policies, both in the US and in Europe. And if you like, we can come back to that later on, but certainly boosting not only appeal by incentives, but also local integration, vertical integration, relocalization of manufacturing and the complete supply chain. Again, we can discuss more deeply on that, but it transformed more recently with this year with the Inflation Reduction Act in Europe with similar action towards incentive and decarbonization of mobility. We definitely see another boost in what will lead us to a full decarbonized mobility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so we can dig deeper into like the differences between Europe, the US, maybe Asia. What can you say, Marc, about like the transitioning and the mobility, like transitioning to those things compared like to other regions? Do you think like there's like a region growing like way faster, or like do you think like the world is like going slowly but like at the same kind of pace?
No, certainly the pace is not the same across the region. I would start by why easy one. Japan is easy one because it can address easily. Japan, it was an early starter, but at the same time big market, but at the same time really a laggard today. Korea has been laggard locally, but in terms of players, Hyundai is a major player. Now, China was really got an early start from not just from the market side with the incentive, but also going all the way across the supply chain to mining, but not mining because they don't have a lot of mining to do locally, except for some of the ingredients or minerals, but they do most of the refining, probably 70% refining, probably the same same market share for cell manufacturing. And so they built a whole industry, a vertical industry across EVs. And now that China will probably be around, maybe 5 million EVs this year, something like that, 5-6 million battery EVs this year out of 25 million, just to make it simple. So significant. Europe is actually in the same pace. Now we've seen took off a bit later, but now is kind of matching in terms of penetration. The different approach, more incentive derived. Closing cities, limiting access to dirty vehicles and the like, and not that much until this year, building supply chain, which is something that's now coming on stream, and it's for the better. reduce to increase independence or reduce dependence on especially on China. The US has definitely been a late starter and lagging. Today is about a third of the market share that Europe or China experiences as of today. But again, the IRA that I referred to earlier is giving a boost to this industry. And beyond that, we've seen, for instance, California being ahead of the pack in the US. California has a penetration of battery EVs similar to that of Europe. We're about 15% here. Again, brief number, California represents about 40%, 35 to 40% of all battery EVs sold in the US. And the San Francisco Bay Area is about half of that. So we're around San Francisco, we do about 20% of all battery EVs sold across the US. Now, California decided just a few weeks ago that by 2035, it was not possible to sell a vehicle that would emit CO2 by that time. And if those who know the way US works in terms of automotive, there are, I think, a dozen states that follow what California does typically, and New York State, which is another big market, just passed a similar tax, and other states that, among the dozen I mentioned earlier, will do the same. And this dozen state represents roughly 30-40% of the US market. So California is ahead of the US definitely at similar pace as Europe, and will lead the pack and will do what the federal government is not doing, but with similar impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Same kind of question, Ethan. When we're talking about like those alternatives to like fueling cars, we're talking about like kind of like urban mobility, and so it's pretty much like freeing our cities from few cars to reduce pollution, to have like a more peaceful environment. But we can see that just in the US, only 97 million people live in cities, just 97 million. So it represents pretty much like 29% of the population just with the US. So what about everyone else in the country? How is that transition going to happen? How are we pushing things in like in the country and in like more those places like this, and not only in the US but like broadly? So I don't know.
There's so many things I could say, and I'm going to try to keep this short. One size doesn't fit all. It never has, and it never will. When I think about where I've spent most of my time, Massachusetts, California, I've been to many places outside of those, but that's the majority of my time. California, even if you just focus on California, it's very diverse. San Francisco is a dense urban city, and there are cities like Fresno, even San Jose. San Jose is not dense. It's spread out. Los Angeles is not dense. It's spread out. We have a lot of land in the United States, and folks that might be in Paris, people who might be in Madrid, might not have experience with the huge area that we live in the United States. That makes it very hard to build something like high-speed rail that connects San Francisco to Los Angeles or Austin to San Francisco. These places are very far apart. That applies not only to high-speed rail, that matters for things like electrification of transportation, because the automobile, the internal combustion engine, just thermodynamically, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, there's a lot of energy in every single gallon of gasoline, an enormous amount, arguably too much. And as evidence, when you lose cooling on an internal combustion engine, it explodes. We have radiators for a reason. The internal combustion engine was a great tool. The electric vehicle is simpler, and it enables us to do some things, but not everything. The electric vehicle, the challenge here, people call it range anxiety. I call it charging anxiety, because some people have some trouble getting from point A to point B. Doing a road trip from, say, San Francisco to Albuquerque, New Mexico, you have to be able to hit charging infrastructure along the way that is operational. And if you just look at the news, you will find that there's a lot of charging infrastructure that's not very well maintained. So there's different problems, and it's not easy for the operators to maintain that infrastructure. they have to roll a truck to that broken charger. It has to get flagged. Somebody has to tell them, or there's an automated sensor that says there's a problem. And you have to respond to that with a replacement part in a time when we have a supply chain crisis. So it's not necessarily fast to solve those problems. And the consequences for not solving those problems is it frustrates the adoption of electric vehicles. We don't want these bad news stories to dominate the press, but they already are in the New York Times and other places saying, and this isn't just the United States, there's charging infrastructure maintenance issues globally. So that's not to say that we aren't on the right track. We are on the right track, but we have challenges that affect places differently. They affect, if you have a big spread out area, it's harder to get from point A to point B in an electric vehicle because the charging infrastructure simply has to work.
Yeah, interesting, very interesting. And on the other hand, Marc, how is the demand or the supply for those either electric vehicles or like the charging stations that we need? How is that happening? Do you think there is like an increase?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the past year, demand has been greater than supply. If you look, for instance, at Tesla, which is obviously a significant example in this space, and definitely the company that brought us where we are in terms of this positioning of EV. And to look at the past year, the demand was such that you had lead time that was exceeded. It was in a months, not weeks, which is would be typically in the industry. You'd be talking about just depending where the vehicle is produced. But if it's produced in the same country, you're talking about a couple of weeks, 4 weeks maybe, and whatever. So we're talking about months here, a year, and that has come down a bit. Obviously, part of that was derived from the shortage of chips, but there's also part of that was coming from insufficient supply versus demand. We've seen also some of the newer players seeing increasing capacity and not necessarily new vehicles rather than places with the Lucy and Rivian more like working on supply than on demand at this point. But if you look at Ford, for instance, on the Mach-E or the pickup truck, from what they say, they had to increase demand, increase supply, increase capacity in order to support demand. So there's a lot of big need there. Now, on Tesla's side, things have cooled down. They're back to more standard lead times. On the charging side, I'm with Ethan. There's an issue based on territory, need, and availability, which it's a big issue. So you need to work on both increasing availability, existence and availability.
Marc, you cut a little bit. Ethan,
it's now we have the supply chain challenges of internet bandwidth.
That was the end of the sentence, right? Okay, I'm gonna invite him again. So Ethan, wanted to ask you a question in terms of infrastructure, and with the distribution of charging for the charging station, for example. What percentage of charging at home or charging publicly, and how is that affecting people who either don't have a home or they can't charge at home, right? So they have to go to public station pretty much.
If Marc, if you wanted to finish your thoughts before I take Florian's next question.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll be brief. I apologize. I don't know what happened. So I was saying that in terms of quantities, not availability, but quantities, the US has approximately 150,000 plugs. Europe is around 400,000, and China is probably 1 million or so. And we talk about public plugs here, not private in your garage or in the basement of an apartment building. One thing also I'd like to mention it's a critical element when you look at the charging infrastructure is the charging event is taking place probably for 80% of it, or thereabout 70-90%, whatever you want to name it, but in the ballpark, is taking place at home or at the office and not at public charging locations. And that's one thing that must be taken into account. Obviously, if you live in an apartment building, it's not the same thing as living in a home, which is more common in the US than it is in the Paris area, for instance. But Ethan, sorry, back to you.
That was actually exactly my question, Marc. So you gave like kind of the numbers.
It's perfect, and just a little bit more color. There's this similarity there where one size doesn't fit all. If you are a homeowner and you have a garage, you can install a level 2 charger or just use the cord that comes with your car, slow charge it. That's great. And there are many opportunities for condos and apartments to put in charging infrastructure, but they don't always have a massive parking garage. And there are practical realities that frustrate the ability to install charging infrastructure in these other places. For instance, if you don't have an electric car and they start constructing in your parking garage, you might not like that. So there's an access issue here, and that's part of the equity and access where there's public money to go out to put in public charging infrastructure, maybe at a bank, maybe at a shopping mall, maybe at a Whole Foods in the United States. We have these charging infrastructure, but the people who are most in need of that public charging infrastructure are those who cannot charge in their own garage.
Interesting.
Can I also, add one thing to that? We're talking about here mostly about private individuals. The vehicle that you as an individual own and may charge at work, at home, at the mall, or if you travel long distances along the freeway. At the same time, and it's more significant. Well, it's definitely significant in the US. That's fleets. And we should not forget that, because there's a fleets. Businesses are being a big lead in terms of electrifying mobility. Certainly in the US, in some places more significantly than private ownership, where people maybe in the center of the US. And I said, by the way, this is also politically driven to some extent, but say to stick to geographies. In the center of the US, maybe people more reluctant to get away from the V8 pickup trucks, but at the same time, fleets see the financial benefits in moving towards electrification. And in that case, they will likely also own their own charging infrastructure that can be on site, where all the vehicles come back every night, whether it's a construction company, whether it's delivery business, whether it's postal services that will be increasingly electrified as well. How many miles or kilometers each a mail vehicle drive every day. You can size the battery just what you need and charge the vehicle at night, and then stagger the charging overnight so you don't overburden the infrastructure or the grid. So we should not forget fleet, I think, in this space. And by the way, also a little thing, I drive electric and I drive an EV Tesla, and I ride an electric motorcycle as well. So I'm full engaged in that. Just a little thing on the side.
I'll keep it conversational and give a yes and. Well, I'm not embarrassed that I have an electric hybrid, right? I drive a Chevy Volt. It's one of these practical realities that I found for me was because I had to cover a territory between, say, charging infrastructure I built for a previous employer in Sacramento down to, say, Southern California and San Diego. I found that the hybrid vehicle was great for me to do two things: build the charging infrastructure, and also I needed to charge my car. And it's kind of funny. I couldn't charge my car on my own charging infrastructure because I didn't have utility power yet at my charging infrastructure. So as for building it, I needed to get between chargers with the hybrid. So it provided me, I actually think hybrids are terrific. And I was disappointed to see General Motors stop producing the Chevy Volt. And we could leave that there, but I'm a huge proponent of electrification, but I see value in the hybrids, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, and talking about those different vehicles that offer the opportunity to be charged. I wanted to come back on something that is like usually talked about a lot is the standardization of the connectors for charging. How are we right now, Marc? For example, like how are we doing here? Are all connectors? Is it like Apple and Samsung, or like what's happening right now?
Leave it to Ethan. He's the expert on that.
Yeah, he is. But
Too kind, Marc. I have used an analogy in the past that I think is useful for explaining it. When I plug in my phone, I have an iPhone. It has a connector. Many years ago, you had a connector that was called a 40-pin connector. Apologize for the seasickness there. I just unplugged my iPad. And if I plugged in this one, USB-C, from the iPad, and the iPad uses USB-C now. Many years ago, these connectors were much more difficult for people to use. On the PC side, back in the day, the PC had PS2 port, parallel port, serial port. On the Apple side, they had something called Apple Desktop Bus. It took some time, but then we had Intel, IBM, Compaq, a bunch of people came together to build an open public standard. And that open public standard was called USB. But it took 15 more years to get to USB-C, where you could rotate the connector upside down and plug it in, just like the human factors that Apple innovated through. That's not what we have today yet in the electrification of transportation. On the Tesla side, they were a first mover, and they have a terrific plug that just works. You plug it in, there's no moving parts. It's a fantastic experience for the customer. It's a fantastic experience for me when I drive a Tesla. But that's not the national standard for the United States. In fact, it's not the standard anywhere. In Europe, they use CCS2. CCS is a connector from a global organization called Charin. That's at charin.global. Mm-hmm. In China, they have a standard called GBT. That one I'm less familiar with, and I'd love, maybe Marc can share something about how, I don't know how the GBT standard came to be, but I know it is. And when Tesla sells their vehicle in China, they do not use the Tesla connector. When they sell their vehicle in Europe, they do not use the Tesla connector. And they've recently gone public and renamed their Tesla connector as NACS, the North American Charging Standard. And this has created some friction in the industry where I've participated, and I've seen some conversations on places like LinkedIn and elsewhere where Charin, who's been working very hard on a global standard for a very long time, is in conflict with what Tesla's bringing to market here. Nothing to take away from Tesla. They have done a fantastic job of being an early mover and making a great customer experience, but that does not make it the national standard.
Marc, do you agree?
No, I mean, yeah. Put some additional color to that. If you look at Tesla's position in the US, definitely, they own more. I think they own more fast charging stations than anybody else in the US, and that by essence is a reason to say, look, I have, maybe I put that throughout a number here, maybe 60%, 70% of fast charging stations in the US are Tesla branded and a Tesla connector. So by essence can allow our friend Elon to say, look, I'm the king of the world, just follow me and I'll show you the world. And by the way, Shademo, which is the Japanese standard, which allows great features like V2G, which is the first one, and still the only one today. Not the only one in the world, but anyways, the first one allowed V2G is going away because, again, Japanese, as I said earlier, are not really king on the hill in this space. But if you look at Europe now, Tesla's position is not what it is in the US. You have other networks, you have Ionity, you have other other brands across different countries. And by the way, also, Tesla started with a Tesla plug in Europe and then switched across to CCS probably 2 years ago because they were not winning the game in terms of connectors. So there may be a different game in the US versus other regions. But I suspect that the industry will kind of fight that because that means that Tesla network will have an upper hand on where people charge. Tesla is opening their network to non-Tesla vehicles now in Europe, where they plan probably to roll that across other countries, especially with this announcement that Ethan referred to. But I suspect the game is quite different, in the various regions, certainly between the US and Europe.
Great. Ethan, you wanted to add something?
Everything, I just couldn't agree more. There's differences between regions. I've seen a success of Tesla working in Europe, and they have built a lot of charging infrastructure globally. Like the work that whole team has done is incredible. Mm-hmm. And it is true that those results speak for themselves. However, it is also true that to standardize something requires collaboration and conversation between people. You don't the analogy that I like here is if Apple was to come in and say, we built the Lightning connector. That's now the USB-C is gone. Now it's Lightning connector standard for everything. No, that's called being a bull in a china shop. And nobody's going to respond well to that. It's not only what you say, but it's how you say it, and it's how you work with other people. And there's a real problem here. And that problem is the same problem that existed many years ago when a company called Better Place tried to do battery swap. You don't build friends by alienating people and telling them what to do. You have to bring people with you on a journey together. And it's very hard to get people from this company that thinks they're competing with this company to collaborate on a standard, but we need them. It's very important. And there's going to be some people, to continue with this analogy, who do not like that the Apple Lightning connector is going to go away. Sorry, it's going away. There's no value in having a different connector for this phone and another connector for that phone. And thanks to the European regulators, we will now have USB-C everywhere. And this is, I think, a better customer experience, so that you don't have to go to your friend's house and say, hey, do you have an adapter? Because that's what we have to do right now with Tesla here and CCS2 here. And to be very specific, when I was going to a launch of the Porsche Taycan, this beautiful electric car, they did it in Atlanta. And in Atlanta, in the United States, they had a CCS2 version of the car, so you couldn't charge it.
Right. Yeah. And talk about like customer experience and on like another competition standpoint. I wanted to ask you, in terms of charging stations, and we know that customer experience plays a big role at least in the buying process for users. What can you say about like the customer experience of like the charging between the industry and maybe the concept, Marc, of plug and charge, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, this is another area where it's good to have the leader to show the way and innovate and take risks. In that case, again, the Tesla took the lead on making it super easy to charge. I mean, when I drive long distances, I stop at whatever charging station along the way. Just get out of the car, take the plug off the stand, put it in your car, and go back, sit and watch Netflix. And for next 20 minutes, and you mostly full or whatever, largely recharged and ready to go again, refreshed. I had a Chevy Bolt before I had a Tesla, and one day you go charge point and you have your card, you're playing with your phone, another day you go to an EV Go, and that's a different card, and sometimes doesn't work, doesn't recognize your phone, doesn't. So the user experience certainly is quite different. Now the industry came together and designed a standard called, no, I forgot the reference, but it's basically plug and charge, what Tesla's been doing for years, which goes across. It's a way for the vehicle to be recognized by the charging station in order to identify who the owner is and what the credit card is in order to charge it without having any other interaction. And so that's certainly makes it easier. Now there's still an issue if you go from one charging network to another, and you still need multiple identifiers to be able to connect, even if it's plug and charge, to connect to one network or another. So there's another dimension to that, which is more roaming, where you have one identifier with one company that itself is connected with multiple networks, and by connecting through this intermediary, then it makes it again easier. It's not as good yet as the T brand, but certainly getting there. So there's still some way to go, but we're getting there slow, progressively.
It's everything that Marc said there. I couldn't agree more. And to continue with the phone example, I have a bunch of charging apps, right? And all of these apps, there's more on the next page. The problem there is sometimes the app might update, make a new version. Maybe it loses your password. Maybe the telecommunications works perfectly. Maybe not. We had some telecom challenges today on this. Technology works, except when it doesn't. And the simple always wins is the way I like to think about this. And what Tesla did is they made something that's simple. You plug in your car and it just works. Steve Jobs would have loved it, because what it does on the back end that's invisible to you is it authenticates to a unique identifier on the car. It connects with that unique identifier to the cloud, and it says, oh, Marc, this is Marc's Tesla. Hi, Tesla. Here's a credit card. Go. If you had free charging, congratulations, you have free charging, but not everybody has free charging. So they have to transact, and that's the telecommunications challenge. If you're in a parking garage underground, it's very hard to get cellular signal. So there's other issues around this that, maybe you hardline something with an Ethernet cable, or maybe you pray that Wi-Fi works. So the reality here on the ground for the charging infrastructure is Tesla has the best experience there is. If you're charging at home, doesn't matter if we're talking about a level 2 charger from Tesla or one of the many other companies that offers one. ChargePoint, Wallbox, keep going. There's folks. There's many of these products. There's a company called Zeal that's looking at doing some very innovative things around moving the data from the charger, the transaction data, using the fact that this thing is connected to the internet. When they get to the out of the parking garage, that might help. So there's a lot of issues here, but that's led. And ChargePoint also was an early leader. These guys have a large market share because they were first movers and they built products that work. The market share speaks for itself.
All right. I see that time is running. Maybe last word, Marc. Did you want to add anything?
I mean,
on the spot.
I'm optimistic about what's happening on decarbonizing mobility, and we haven't talked about trucking, which is another space where things are happening as well. Last mile deliveries. So I mean, new products are coming out in the market as electric, as a motorcycle, as a biker. I see that also coming slowly, but people are reluctant. But overall, I think people realize also this is where we need to go. Our governments are making the right push. So yes, I'm optimistic. There's still some kinks in the system, but obviously nothing can come out of the out of the shelf with ready to run and perfectly. So yeah, we're optimistic.
Definitely. Ethan, last word.
So great to be here. Everything's moving in the right direction. We have both policy and business pointing in the same direction. This is really good because as they both point in the same direction, we can move together fast. That's electric mobility from e-bikes, which I'm seeing not just in the United States, they're in Madrid, they're in Italy, I'm sure they're in Paris. I haven't been since electric mobility happened. The trucking, but one thing we didn't touch on that's worth conversation, maybe it'll come up another time, the shared fleets that Marc touched on. I have an app that I can go and I can, in the Bay Area, get something called gig car share. I just beep just like I was getting a scooter and I get in the car and drive it. And that means we don't all need to own a car. There's obviously great value if you have a baby and you want to have a car seat and you want it in your car, then it needs to be your car. But these, whether it's gig car share or Tesla doing what they're doing with robo-taxis, with autonomous, or Waymo doing what they're doing, Cruise doing what they're doing, there's a lot of excitement around robo-taxi, around self-driving. Some people, have concerns around what level of autonomy that is and giving up control of driving, but we are all distracted by cell phones. And, I for one am hoping that there will be more safe transportation with some computer control. It's already doing great things that I've seen for me with lane keep assist and forward-looking radar that's detecting your following distance. I think these are good things. So that's both from two-wheel electric vehicles like bikes all the way to autonomous driving. I think we're moving in the right direction and it's exciting to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Couldn't agree more. On my part, I don't own a vehicle or a bike. I use Zipcar. So for now, it's only like fuel cars, but let's hope that they change that as well. Thank you so much. Thank you again for accepting my invitation. It was great. I had like 20 more questions, but unfortunately, time is running. So yeah, thank you again, and please stay with us for the second part of the event.
Thanks for having us, Florian.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Merci à tous. Bonne soirée en France.
Great. Great. So we're going to continue with our presentations. We're going to start the startup presentation, and I believe Nick is not here today. Nick, maybe you can ping me on the chat, but I don't believe he's here. So that's why I took a bit more time with the panelists. So we're just like 3 minutes late now. So I'm going to invite Brian. Great. So I'm going to invite Brian Manning for the presentation. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
Hi. Great. So I'm going to share your presentation. So I don't know if you have access to move the slides, but if not, you can tell me and I will move it. Okay?
Sure. Just trying to get my camera to work here.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I guess just get it off and rolling then. So I'm Brian. I'm the CEO here at Zona. At Zona, what we were doing is most succinctly described as building super GPS using small satellites. And that's really specifically designed to support modern transportation needs, things like autonomous vehicles, drones, aerial mobility, et cetera, and a lot of things that we just heard the panelists talk about. So we go to the next slide. Before we dive too much into the what we do, it's always really helpful, I think, to explain why we're doing what we're doing, because that is something really important to us. Is our team comes from a mix of backgrounds. So I'm a former SpaceX engineer. Our CTO came from Ford's autonomous division. We've got people from the civil aviation world, from autonomous places like Waymo, et cetera. So we have a whole team that's very excited, enthusiastic, and big believers in what modern technologies can bring to the world in terms of safety and a lot of other things that we just heard folks mentioning, but able to to be able to do that, they really need to be able to operate safely and operate safely in any environment. And having reliable and accurate navigation and timing is just absolutely foundational to be able to make that happen. And GPS is a phenomenal system, but the needs and demands of the commercial world are starting to outgrow and kind of outpace the pace that it is evolving at. So we've been very fortunate to have support and other folks joining in the belief here with Toyota Ventures, Lockheed Martin, and quite a few others that have joined us on our journey here. So if you go to the next slide. So to chat a little bit more about what we're doing, when I say it's super GPS, okay, what are we kind of talking about? Today there's, we're certainly not the first ones to identify the challenges with GPS as it stands today, and different user communities have generally built kind of their own solutions to try and solve their own challenges. So for example, the military has their own secure, encrypted GPS. The agriculture and surveying communities have figured out how to set up these kind of correction services that help you get higher accuracy, but it comes at the cost of resilience of the overall solution. The civil aviation community has their own monitoring systems that add higher integrity, to add higher safety. And then in other industries, folks in the new space world are using these LEO satellites to get, high power, full global coverage in a very cost effective manner. What we're doing is kind of combining all those into one, calling it Super GPS, which is Pulsar, which is our constellation here that brings all those together and puts them into one system. And that one, high performance satellite navigation system is designed both to complement and act as a, augmentation and enhancement to existing GPS. But in the case that GPS isn't around, it also can actually operate as a full, completely independent backup and alternative also, which is very key for a lot of industries that are looking and need to have global redundant systems on board. So you go on the next slide, please. So very brief on where we've been. We're only about 3 years old here, but we've grown to about 45 people now. We've gone from basically the idea to lab test to ground test, and then in less than a year after our ground test, we went to orbit. So we launched our first satellite back in May. As far as we know, that established us as the first ever privately funded company to actually launch a satellite navigation mission, which is pretty exciting. A lot of this, GPS is all about timing. And so a lot of our core IP is around, we're calling it distributed atomic clock architecture that allows us to provide very high performance satellite navigation services from a very small, low cost satellite, as opposed to the more classical method of much larger satellites. And so you can almost think of it as, kind of doing satellite navigation more with the, the SpaceX method as opposed to the government contracting method in terms of speed and agility. So you can go to the next slide, please. What does this actually look like in terms of a rollout? We learned real quickly, as a venture-backed company, you can't just say, hey, we need 300 satellites before we get any revenue, that you have to be able to step into it. So with only around 40 satellites, we can actually already start providing services around mid-latitudes, in the US, in Europe, et cetera. This allows us to basically operate as like that GNSS enhancement, as I mentioned. As we get to 70 satellites, those services become global. And then these are just kind of stepping stones up towards the full 300. And this has been resonating well with customers that we've got well into the millions of subscriptions in demand already. And I think around a dozen user equipment manufacturers that have already, begun either scoping or already working on, or even some have finished integration of our Pulsar service into their GNSS equipment. And that's one of the key source services that is designed to be able to be very easily integrated into existing GPS and GNSS architectures. So going to the next slide, I believe that is all we had. So we'll keep it short and sweet, but great to be here, and thank you everyone for the time.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for your presentation. Great. So we're going to keep moving, and so we're going to have Steve up. Steve, I believe you need to reconnect because right now it's not working as a participant. So you can leave the platform and come back. It means that your connection is not good enough. So I'm just going to move on, and we'll come back to you, Steve. Great. So I'm going to invite Colin now. So Carla, if you can join me on stage. Hello. Great. I think you're on mute, Carla, so you can just like press the microphone button. Perfect.
Okay, great. You can hear me. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Carla Levine. I am the Director of Strategic Sales for Crowdbotics, and it's so nice to be here with you all today. Next slide. So let me tell you about what we do. So Crowdbotics develops software applications, both web and mobile. We do it faster, we do it better, and at a lower cost than the traditional methods of doing it yourself. So our developers use our platform, and they set up scaffolding to build repeatable functionality. So there's two parts to our solution. The first part is our platform that actually generates code. And the second part is a crowdsourced development team. So by leveraging the future of work, we enable speed and efficiency to deliver applications at a fraction of the cost. So the customer always owns their IP and they always own the code. And so as far as this slide is concerned, the things I want to point out here is that we've developed over 25,000 unique applications, all written in full code, and we've achieved over 300% growth just last year. Also last year, we closed on our Series A round of funding and are closing in currently on our Series B. So we're headquartered in Berkeley, California, and our workforce is 100% remote. You can advance to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so we accelerate innovation, but to turn your core innovation into a business, you need software. You need the software to drive awareness of what it is that you're doing. You have to entice customers. You want to deliver amazing customer experiences and create some loyalty along the way. But you also need applications for internal use to increase efficiency of your business. And we know that the more money you spend on software, the less time, money, and attention that you have to innovate. So this is where Crowdbotics comes in. We can help you decrease the cost of software development by 66%. So how do we do it? Well, most applications use the same code over and over again, kind of like when you're building a new home. Everyone needs the same scaffolding. So where we're relevant and how we do it is really in the power of our platform. So again, we know that the majority of software development is repeatable, like that scaffolding that goes up every time you build a new home. So let's translate that into software terms. Think about a login screen, or in the context of what we're talking about today, connecting to a geolocation or a schedule builder. And that's the 40 to 80% repeatability that's depicted on this slide. So what I'm talking about here are code generation modules. And we are building out this growing library of modules that generate real code to enable this type of repeatable functionality. So automation allows you to focus on your value proposition, which is that 20% differentiator that makes your business unique. Next slide. So here are just a few examples of some of the smart mobility apps that we're building today. Some of these companies are startups and some of them are in the Fortune 500. So I'll go through them. So we first have a vehicle diagnostics app, and that's really to verify what your mechanic is telling you is accurate. A babysitters on wheels application for when you can't get to the daycare on time, and a ride sharing application for the hospitality industry. And although today's event is all around smart mobility, Crowdbotics is industry agnostic. We develop many different types of applications, both web and mobile, applicable to all industries. Next slide. So this is the last one. So the takeaways are this. We're fast, we're scalable, we're secure, and we offer it all at a low cost. And again, how we do it, we're two things. First, we're a rapid application development platform. This platform is built around code generation modules that enable the speed and efficiency. That's the scaffolding. The goal is to write the code once, test it once, and publish it many times over. Again, you always own the IP and the code. And secondly, we are a team of expert managed services. We have an on-demand crowdsourced team of certified developers, and that's how you get to the 20% differentiator to build on your unique capabilities. And last slide. All right, so thank you very much for your time. Again, my name is Carla Levine. I am offering everyone in this meeting a free scoping session to scope a project. So if you have an idea and you'd like to run it by me, I would love to hear from you. I can be reached at carla@crowdbotics.com. I want to say thank you very much to Florian and the Choose Paris region for including Crowdbotics today.
Thank you so much, Carla. Really good presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So we're going to move on with Steve. I believe Steve is okay to participate now. So we're going to have the presentation of Sanadia. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Sorry for that. Steve. Great. So we're just going to wait for Steve. I believe he has like a few buttons to click, but should be here shortly. Steve, can you make it? Just let me know. Okay, perfect. We got it.
Excellent. So I apologize for that. There was a little button that said compatibility.
Yeah, I know.
Hey, we'll bring us back up to speed. First off, hello, I'm Steve Dissinger, the Vice President of Business Development at Sanadia. Just wanted to thank Florian for the opportunity invitation to discuss our company with the team here. My goal in the next 5 minutes is to just simply introduce the people to an amazing piece of technology that my guess is if it is not already part of most of the people on the call's digital infrastructure, it will be in the near future. And it was interesting discussion of the first part. We're actually working with a couple EV charging companies out in California, so maybe that'll be a separate follow-up. But we can go on next slide. So first, just let me introduce you to the company. Sanadia was founded in 2017, and we're commercializing a cloud-native computing foundation software project called NATS. We're a VC-backed startup, core team coming from places like TIBCO, Google, VMware, and we bring just deep experience in building some very complex, low latency, highly distributed systems that power the likes of Wall Street, telco networks, and industrial platforms. And I'd love to have a chat maybe in the future with the GPS company that presented before us. That would be something that we can work on together. So Sanadia engages with both really large Fortune 100 scale companies, but some of our more interesting work is with all these emerging software innovators that are building global SaaS platforms and disrupting some of the legacy technology companies. We work with a ton of them, and so we provide both enterprise support subscription around our open source technology, but we also provide a globally managed SaaS service we call NGS. We'll get into that a little bit more, but next slide. Yeah, so what do we do? Well, from our perspective, if you hear the terms multi-cloud and more importantly, edge, they're just driving a massive transformation at the moment. So the current technologies deployed today are being asked to do a lot more. The expectations on all of us are changing on where the data should be, where it's compute located, as well as building, highly adaptive applications. So depending on where your services need to be delivered today, tomorrow across the globe, whether it's changing business or regulatory requirements, there's new technologies that are needed. And our view, frankly, is that the cloud is a new mainframe. So the public cloud, it's not going anywhere, but it's not where the new frontier is. So we believe that the edge will dwarf the cloud by orders of magnitudes over the next 5 years. And that's really where all the critical innovation and investments are going, and where our customers and partners are differentiating kind of themselves and meaning that new customer experience that is being demanded on all of us. So NATS, which is our technology, is a truly a grassroots product-led success stories. A developer finds us. We really don't do any marketing. They find us by looking for a cloud-native, open-source alternative to some existing technology. That might include things like IBM, TIBCO, Kafka, if you've heard of that. But the applications that are driving it are things such as AI, ML, IoT, real-time communications, autonomous vehicles, green energy, blockchain, even metaverse. We have a few metaverse customers now. So these are all applications that we are working with our customers on today. And there's two real core areas that we're differentiated from most of the other players in the market. And that's around, again, the desire of people to be more cloud agnostic, as well as to deliver things out closer to the customer. And that's really what we are calling the edge. Next slide. So what is NATS? NATS is really, and by the way, there's probably a really good chance that at the majority of your companies, a developer is either already using it or looking at using it. They just might have not made the connection to Synadi as a commercial entity. So the server has been downloaded over 300 million times, and we're at this moment powering thousands of applications in production today. But specifically, we're an open source, high performance messaging system, and what we like to call connective fabric. And what we do is we aim to simplify the number of technologies your developers use in building the services, while building what we would call a multi-cloud, multi-geo, highly adaptive infrastructure. So you could view us kind of as plumbing, but for your data, but we're very smart plumbing as well as important. Developers love us. I mean, they just love the simple API, the simple Golang, the modern approach versus some of the other options. But turns out CIOs, CTOs, and business leaders love us because we dramatically reduce the costs and the simplicity of your microservices architecture. So instead of building, separate servers or platforms or architectures for pub sub, data streaming, key values, object stores, we do that all in a single platform. And it's a open sourcing that people could just download. And so while it's important to reduce costs, what's probably more important that it really accelerates the innovation around delivering these new globally distributed services. We like to use the term edge first because if our belief is if you're not investing in the edge now, you will be in the next 24 months. It's the North Star for everything we do on our product roadmap, drives every decision we make. And that's really dramatically accelerates developers' ability to extend the existing services you have out to the edge. And for us, the edge could be a store, a plant floor, an EV charging station, an automobile, a windmill. It doesn't really matter. It's uniquely positioned to run in those types of environments. And then I'll end with Florian. Next slide. Just want to do highlight a few of our customers across financial services, retail, manufacturing, kind of circled in red here. A few of the ones that local French market. You can see we're very vertically agnostic and being used by really big companies, but also by a lot of small innovative companies. So hopefully if you're having issues with legacy proprietary software slowing down your development initiatives, or experiencing really high cloud costs, or maybe more importantly, you're defining an edge strategy, that you'll think about Synadi and NATS and add it to your target list of engagements. So I'll just end it with there's a list of resources we have on the next slide, but we're more than happy to answer any questions or engage after the event. But thanks, Florian, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for your presentation. Great. So we're going to go to our last presentation with Edward. And I believe Edward will share his screen. If he can, I will just share his presentation. All right, just one Second. Great. Hello, Edward.
Florian,
Yes, I
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's not apparent to me that my camera is working. I'm clicking on the icon, but it doesn't seem to function.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably something with your browser. Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to share the presentation?
Actually, why don't you go ahead and share?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll commence, even though I can't get my camera to work. Okay. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts about Grip Molecular. Have you ever been at home and experienced worsening disease symptoms and felt anxious or confused about what to do next because you did not know which disease was causing the problem? Next slide, please. If you have, you're among the many millions who annually suffer with an infectious disease, where the trade-offs of performance in today's diagnostic tests have left us, and importantly, our clinicians, wondering what to do next, while precious time is wasted that could have been used to appropriately treat the disease and prevent further infection. Next slide, please. I was particularly delighted to receive the invitation for this event. I was actually in a restaurant in Avignon meeting with former colleagues and friends from my many years living and working in France when I received the invitation. As Florian had mentioned, I'm Ed Gillen and the CEO of Grip Molecular. We intend to address the many unmet needs in today's diagnostics world with the device that you see pictured here. If the device was going to be used at home, for example, and going to be used for upper respiratory infectious disease, as an example, although it could be used for literally any disease, the device would be purchased at retail pharmacy for about 40 euro. And the outer packaging would have a barcode. You would take a picture of that barcode with a standard cell phone, and it would load an app onto the cell phone ready for use. And then at the time of use, you would open up the packaging, gather up the sample, whether that was a nasal sample or a saliva sample or a urine sample. You would mix it with a solution that would be in a container that would come with the device, and then inject it into the device that you see pictured here. And so at the time of use, you would bring that product with the sample injected inside in proximity to a cell phone, a standard cell phone. And that cell phone would power the device and open up the app and immediately display the result. I'll highlight that there are no batteries, wires, connectors, chargers, or separate reader that are required. And what it would do is provide highly accurate diagnostic results that would be for multiple diseases simultaneously with one sample, and provide those results in literally minutes. And then once that information is on the cell phone, it would facilitate their communication to a clinician and a telehealth interaction, rapid diagnosis, and the prescription of appropriate therapy. Next slide, please. This device could be used in the home or any other point of need, including elder care facilities, hospitals, clinics, retail pharmacy, etc. It can be used literally by anyone at any point and give immediate results when they're desired. Next slide, please. Our technology validation has been completed, and it has yielded extraordinary results in terms of accuracy, both in terms of sensitivity and specificity. We have demonstrated the ability to do multiplexing, which is the detection of multiple diseases with one sample. We have done that with influenza A, RSV, and COVID-19 in both saliva and nasal secretion samples. And for those that are technically versed, we have achieved low femtomolar detection levels, which is equivalent to about 10 to the fourth copies per milliliter in 2 minutes. So extraordinary levels of sensitivity and, in fact, specificity. Clinical validation is underway in a world-renowned research hospital here in the United States. We will be comparing our results directly to PCR, ELISA, and lateral flow antigen tests, which are the ones that are most commonly used today. The frozen sample calibration step has been completed, and we are moving to doing the clinical validation with fresh samples during this winter's cold and flu season, which is imminent. Next slide, please. Our sources of competitive advantage are summarized here. So we have a platform technology which has given unsurpassed results in the laboratory and now moving into the clinical validation step. Those results are achieved in less than 5 minutes, and again, with more broad multiplexing capability. The system is very easy to use. It can be adapted to new pathogen strains very readily. We have a number of issued patents, 5 actually in total. We have 14 pending patent applications. The product has been designed from inception for high volume production. And we have established collaboration partners with the University of Minnesota Nanofabrication Center, which is yielding 85% yield on our sensor production. And we also have a collaborative relationship with J&J and the US Biodefense Agency, which is providing services and also a source of funding. We have a highly experienced management team. All of us on the management team have 35 years or more tenure in the medical device industry. Next slide, please. And finally, my last slide. Everything that I've described in terms of technology validation and clinical performance validation is depicted on the lower left-hand portion of this slide. We have funded those activities with $5 million that we have raised to date on our convertible note, and we have another $1 million that are still available for investment on a convertible note. We have conversations underway about a Series A round to fund the early stage product development activities. Those would then set the stage for a subsequent $20 million raise to fabricate, to create the fabrication capabilities, produce the product for our clinical trials and conduct those clinical trials, setting the stage then for dossier submission to the FDA and for CE Mark in Europe in 2024 and subsequent commercial launch. So thank you very much for this opportunity to introduce you to Grip Molecular. If you would like more information about the company or this investment opportunity, please contact me at edward.gillen@gripmolecular.com. And Florian, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Edward. Thank you. Great. Perfect. So this was our last presentation. So just wanted to come back on our last presentation. This was the last event of the year. So we will see you next year for more events. And if you need to contact me, you can either contact me on LinkedIn or via email. Thanks so much to all the presenters again, and I will see you next time. Thank you.